NightMerica is an independently produced podcast. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/NightMerica. And please tell your friends about us.
Welcome to NightMerica, a podcast that takes you on a tour of the abnormal, paranormal, weirdly true, and truly weird in every corner across this nation. Because, to paraphrase Ray Parker Jr., whether it's ghosts, aliens, monsters, or monstrous humans, there's something strange in your neighborhoods. Episode 18. What's up with weird ranches? I'm Aaron Sagers, one half of the hosting duo. It's like I almost forgot who I was for a second there. I'm Aaron Sagers, one half of the hosting duo of NightMerica from Travel Channel's Paranormal Caught on Camera, Paranormal Lockdown Evidence Revealed from Discovery, Paranormal Paparazzi, a lot of stuff. You know the drill. Joined, as always, by Brett.
Or should I say by Brett, because we're doing ranches.
We are doing ranches. I think
I did live in Huntsville, Alabama for a year, so I think I got a pretty good southern accent.
I mean, if that's what just was, I'm going to have to disagree with you. You went into some sort of like Kentucky colonel kind of like, now I'll say here, we got a podcast up on our hands here. That's what you were doing. That's you. Mine is more of a, I don't know if you ever hear it. Somebody actually did pick up that I have a slight southern drawl.
Let me hear it.
It's funny because it's not like I tried to get rid of it. I just sort of phased it out. Or maybe I never really had a super strong one since only half of my family is really, really southern. But it's especially if I'm tired or I drink, it starts coming out. I can't fake it. It's like a, I don't know, now I'm just doing an accent. Like, I don't know. It's like a loosening of the tongue. Did you have a French accent when you moved back from France?
No, not at all. Because my parents are from Southern Illinois.
Yeah, but how long did you live there?
Like 6 years.
Yeah. So.
Not really. It was hard because I would sub words like in France in school.
Like fromage. I would like a grilled fromage.
No. I would like the word notebook in French is cahier. So like in school, it was always just called cahier. So moving to Chicago, I would like talk about a cahier and like people wouldn't get it.
Yeah, because
yeah.
That's like the least cool French word. Like if you had like a cooler French word, like
my favorite French word is caoutchouc, which means rubber.
Caoutchouc?
Like your rain boots are made of caoutchouc.
Caoutchouc.
Yeah.
Caoutchouc. That's different than cochon, which is pig.
Cochon? That's
cochon. Pig. Ah, yes. Oui. Anyhow. This has been a delightful detour. All you people that are listening to this podcast for the very first time, there's actually some paranormal and true crime stuff that's about to happen. It's not just talking about our accents and cool French words. Although, check out our new podcast, Cool French Words, dropping soon. That's not happening.
That's not happening.
So we're going to talk about weird ranches. Before we get into that, I think we should talk a little bit about just why ranches are so weird. But before we get into that, let's hear some newsy items. Britt, what's your weird news for the week?
I will say I have been having a really hard time finding weird news because there's literally nothing happening in the world, like, in terms of weird news, because everyone's trapped inside.
I disagree. Wait, hold on. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. It's like, I would argue there's perhaps more weird news happening.
No way, you're wrong.
No, we've even talked about it. Like, I think there's more paranormal activity or potential paranormal activity that's been going on during the pandemic.
Yeah, but I already did like 2 articles on that.
Well,
people are gonna get bored.
So anyhow, you just didn't do your homework to find a
No,
good
I
article.
did. I
Okay.
did. I found something that I'm super excited about because it's a topic that I actually might want to cover on the show at one point. But yesterday, a new report from the NTSB, which is what, like the National Travel Safety Board, um, came out saying that a plane vanished over the Bermuda Triangle.
Wow.
I am obsessed with the Bermuda Triangle. I wanted to do a story on it, but I also feel like there's a million podcasts who have done it really well. Supernatural by Ashley Flowers actually did one not that long ago that was really good, but
I like
you
your
can let
setup
us
there
know.
that there's been a lot of places that have done it so well. So it's like we shouldn't even try. This operation, let's not even. Other places have done it well, but not
Well,
us.
this is something I was going to talk about in my main story, but one of the things I struggle with this podcast is like, do we cover stories that are well known or do we cover stories that are not well known? So I posted it to Instagram and like 93% of our listeners said they want stories that are not well known. So the people
Well,
have spoken. Anyway, so a report came out yesterday that pilot Ken Simmons experienced spatial disorientation when flying over the Bermuda Triangle in February of last year, but the report just came out yesterday. He was a super frequent flyer. He would fly with his family sometimes like twice a week. He was not a novice. He'd been doing it for years. He was a vet and he actually would fly to the Bahamas to do like freelance veterinary services, which is pretty cool. But that day he was on the plane with his wife and his two golden retrievers. Let's have a moment for the golden retrievers.
I
So
feel like you were expecting me to react with that.
I know you're heartless towards animals. It's fine.
That's not fair, but it was just too much of a softball.
Hmm.
Felt too much like a
The
setup.
the
And I
report
hate
that came
golden
out.
retrievers.
I don't like golden
No,
retrievers either.
I'm
I'm a
just
wiener
kidding. I
dog
don't
girl.
like golden. Who
Oh,
hates golden retrievers? They're some of the most
me!
likable
They're
dogs.
so stupid.
They're not.
We just
Well,
lost so many listeners. We're gonna get so much
not
hate mail.
not for me. I'm pro golden retrievers.
I'm a wiener dog girl all the way, as our listeners know. But the report that came out yesterday said that he crashed 15 minutes after takeoff. And while he was in the air over the Bermuda Triangle, all of his systems stopped. Like autopilot wouldn't work. The compasses got all discombobulated, which is super common over the Bermuda Triangle. And the Coast Guard searched for a day and a half after the crash happened, and they couldn't find any sign of the wrecked plane. So where did it go? They don't
So,
know.
did you say at the top of the story though that he experienced spatial? Would you?
Disorientation.
Oh, well, oh, okay. See, I thought that the story was going to have a happy ending, like the guy made it back alive, but he's missing.
No, they're gone.
Oh,
They're totally gone. So, according to science, most likely what happened is because there were storm clouds in the air, he might have gone through two separate storm clouds to like weave out of their way. But the turbulence between the two storm clouds were so strong that it ripped the plane apart, um, which is most likely what happened. But I'm curious about the Bermuda Triangle. I think there's something weird, and maybe it's not supernatural. Maybe it's not a portal to another world, but I think there's something with magnets and how it screws up all of these flight systems.
so just real briefly, one word. What do you think? What do you think it's magnets? That's what's going on in the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, yeah,
Not portal, not aliens, not interdimensional travel.
correct. What do
Magnets.
you think?
I don't know. I kind of leave open the possibility for all of it.
Yeah.
Who knows? Could be weird. I do
But
wonder occasionally, just because I am also a science fiction nerd, if it's like something where someone then gets transported to some sort of, uh, you know, prehistoric Jurassic age or whatever, and suddenly there's a plane in you know,
Wouldn't that be
And
so cool that the dinosaurs then meet these two golden retrievers and they're like, what
I don't
the fuck?
I don't think that's how it would go, but I think I would just be like, oh, a new thing for
The
me to
T
eat.
Rex would be like, why are your front legs so long?
Yes. Oh, T-Rex. He's both the king of the dinosaurs, king of the lizards, and also the king of punchlines.
Someone cover my eyes.
Oh, that was a Toy Story quote, wasn't it?
It's my favorite Toy Story
Yes.
quote.
Yes. Well, my story, yeah, I mean, first off, the Bermuda Triangle. There's a lot of we could do a whole triangle episode actually.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the Bridgewater Triangle. There's one I discovered recently, I think it's called Merlin's Triangle, which segues into
Whoa.
my news item. And there's also a lot to be said about ley lines, which are not
Mm-hmm.
really necessarily proven, but they're an interesting concept. But yeah, so I'll segue into my story then with the Merlin's Triangle. But in England, in Durrington, southwest England, scientists, archaeologists more specifically, have discovered a previously unknown prehistoric monument that is close to Stonehenge. And it involves at least 20 prehistoric shafts, which is more than 33 feet in diameter and 16 feet deep on the ancient site where Stonehenge sits. So they believe this is a monument, Neolithic in age, created 4,500 years ago, also 4,500 years ago. And Stonehenge was constructed around 3,000 years or 3,000
Mm-hmm.
BC. So this would be, I guess, even older than that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the archaeologists said it demonstrates clearly sophisticated practices, demonstrating that the people were so in tune with natural events to an extent we can barely conceive in the modern world we live in today, which is always
Whoa.
crazy. Yeah.
It is so crazy.
No comparative prehistoric structure in the UK encloses such a large area as the Circle of Shafts at Durrington, and the structure is currently unique. And some believe that it was built, well, the team of archaeologists, not just some, believe that this was built as a boundary to a sacred area or precinct associated with Stonehenge.
Mm.
And of course, Stonehenge, we all know is sort of these big ritualistic structures and enclosures in the stone circle. And what's crazy is like throughout England in particular, there are these other stone circles. I've been to some of these other ones that, some believe are connected to solstices, which happened not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was last Saturday was the summer
Yeah.
solstice. So, there's a lot of interesting connections between Stonehenge, and then there's connections to aliens. Some believe that these are either structures used to communicate with aliens, ancient aliens. Some think that like crop circles, which crop circles are not that far away from Stonehenge, some of the famous ones, especially the one that was on the cover of the Led Zeppelin album,
Oh, I
that
didn't know that it was so close to Stonehenge.
that was like communicating with aliens as well, or maybe something like Stonehenge or some of these circles were essentially landing sites, like landing ports for alien craft, all sorts of connections. But the thing that I just find from an archaeological standpoint that's intriguing about this, and this story comes from CNN, but it was all over the place, is just that, we still don't know a lot about
Mm-hmm.
this whole deal. So the fact that we're still learning about our ancient world and what our ancestors were up to is just pretty mind-blowing, even if there's no paranormal connection to it, that we're still discovering stuff from 4,500 years ago. It's kind of
Yeah.
wild. But
What
yeah,
year was Easter Island? What year were those heads?
I don't know offhand. I guess I could look this up though. It was, I believe, 1200 AD, perhaps,
Okay.
is
So
when
that
they,
was more recent then.
yeah, relatively
Okay.
recent.
Okay. Because I was wondering, like, oh, maybe it's something like these old civilizations, like kind of similar, but no, that was more recent.
Yeah, well, unless it predated them.
True.
So, but no, it seems like the Moai statues were around 1100 to 1680
Okay.
AD were constructed in that. So, the Merlin's Triangle, by the way, is another thing. Keep an eye out for that. I think you're going to be hearing more about that, but that's potentially connected to Stonehenge and some other
Cool.
circles. But ranches.
Ranches.
So we were talking about this topic, and what's up with weird ranches?
Dude, there's so many weird ranches.
Yeah, well, from a paranormal perspective, there's Skinwalker Ranch. I
Hmm.
don't know what if you know a lot about that one or what do
I
you know?
know a little bit.
It's basically a place where a lot of weird activity occurs, where there's indigenous people, spiritualism connected there. There's alien activity supposedly. There's reports of cryptids on there. All sorts of crazy stuff is happening on Skinwalker Ranch. And then there's also, of course, which we're recording this on July 4th weekend, which is right around the time that the Roswell incident
Hmm.
took place. And, that crashed on a ranch. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens on ranch. And you were mentioning another sort of famous true crime ranch story.
Yeah, from the true crime, there's, of course, the Clutter family, who is the center of the In Cold Blood book by Truman Capote. Honestly, probably my second favorite book of all time. Um, and it's the story of a family, of course, that was massacred on their ranch. And then there's also the Wineville chicken coop murders, which was shown in the more. There's like 500 versions of the Changeling, but this was in the most recent one with Angelina Jolie. They show that. And Wineville actually changed their name as a city because they were so horrified to be connected with these. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of weird shit at ranches.
Why do you think that? Yeah, so I mean, with that said, those aren't the stories we're going to tell because these are pretty well known,
Hmm.
famous stories. Maybe we'll get around to it at some point, but we're still a young podcast, so we're just thinking about, I don't know. There's been so much written about Skinwalker Ranch and Roswell. Great stories, some really great writers out there and great accounts that I just felt like set that aside for the moment. That was
Yeah.
kind of your thought with In Cold Blood and Truman Capote's story as well. Why do you think so much is happening on ranches?
I I mean, just off the top of my head, I feel like because it's such open space, there's not a lot around. From a true crime capacity, it's easy to get away with crimes because people aren't right on top of each other to, see what's happening, see what goes down, so you can get away with things a little bit easier. And then from like an alien incident, they got these like big places for them to land their ships.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's my
I
scientific.
I'm yes, we're bringing a lot of hard science into NightMerica this week. Um,
What do you think?
well, I mean, I don't know how often the aliens are actually landing, but I do agree that the wide open space is part of
Wide
that.
open spaces. Sorry, I'll
Don't
cut that
sing
out.
don't sing too much. Look, I think you can only sing. I forget how much you can sing of a song before we have a copyright
True.
flag. But no, leave that in so everybody can hear your lovely singing voice.
This episode's going off the rails.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. Speak for yourself. I'm firmly on the rails. Anyhow, I agree. Wide open spaces, a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
So, with that said, not much has been said at all. But let's get into, before we get into the first story, Let's hear from our sponsors. But let's not talk for a second. Let's hear from our sponsors, which is still us talking. Think things are bad now? Well, it could be worse. Don't believe me? Just read Dead Run, the new sci-fi thriller from author Mike Maddox. A mysterious force is taking control of people's bodies and making them run to stay alive. And if you can't keep running, now this is the ad copy, so I'm reading the ad copy because it says, if you can't keep running, you blow up like spaghetti left in the microwave too long. It's not a good scene. Mm-mm. It's a very messy situation.
And it's got to have marinara sauce because then it kind of looks like blood.
Right. And the pasta itself would be sort of look like viscera.
Ew.
And except in a microwave, but at least in a microwave, you're contained. The explosion is contained. Yeah. It's a messy microwave to clean up. But if you're running down the road and you can't run anymore, just splat. And then you're all over your friends and the other apocalyptic pals.
Ew, do not nearby. Splat on me.
And in an apocalypse, you don't have easy access to soap, water. Mm-mm. I don't even know if you can stop running long enough to like shampoo and bathe after your friend, your pal is just blown up on you. Anyhow, I mean, this is really, I think, selling the book. Anyhow, the story follows a group of weary travelers as they make their way through a hellish landscape where there's only one rule: run or die. This is Dead Run. And other than being chilling and scary, it will also perhaps inspire you to eat the right kind of carbs and jog every day just in case this apocalypse hits. So check it out. It's available exclusively on Amazon Kindle. It's only like $3. It's well worth your $3. And read Dead Run by Mike Maddox on Amazon Kindle. And we're back. Okay. So let's dive into this first story. I don't know why. I feel like are you on drugs this week?
I don't know. I'm really tired.
You're slappy. Like you're punch drunk.
I got back from Phoenix this week and it's a 3-hour time change. I'm quarantining before I go back to work. And I cannot adapt to this time change. I don't know what time it is. I'm really tired.
Mm-hmm.
But let's do this.
I mean, I'm glad you could share, though. I like it when you share.
Yeah. Everyone likes it when I share.
Yes.
Everyone on Instagram acts like I'm the funniest one, so thanks, guys.
Okay.
Yeah. I also run the Instagram, so.
Yeah, so it's kind of highlighting. Yeah. In fact, I feel like we'll use this public forum to hash this out. So you post a picture of your injured foot. So the NightMerica podcast is hosted by Britt and Aaron, and then I see this injured foot, and I'm like, I don't know what message this is sending to people whose foot is being posted out there. Do you tag your foot?
No.
As that shop girl, which is your personal Instagram?
No. And I comment.
I'm gonna start posting my hairy legs. And then I'm going to just let it go and let people determine
Honestly,
whether...
at this point with quarantine, ain't nobody seeing me. They could be my legs, too.
God, if my hairy legs could be... No judgment for anyone that doesn't want to shave their legs, but if you could produce the amount of hair that's on my legs, I have hairy legs, people. Wow.
This might be our best episode yet.
Yeah. So it's going to be a steep drop-off of subscribers after this one.
Steep.
Let's maybe talk about, instead of legs, something, tragic. What's your story?
As I was saying before, I was not wanting to do these super well-known stories. So I was doing some digging and actually found this really interesting story from my new favorite website, modernfarmer.com. It's actually a really well done website and had this incredible article by Andrew Amelinks. And then I also got a lot of information from the super old newspaper, the Taconic newspaper, an article by Alan Merritt. This crime that I'm about to talk about happened in 1930. So it's fun to see like all these really old school papers. There's a lot of good stuff on the internet, guys. So it's Thanksgiving Day, 1930, and Bernice Germund is on the bus home from her college in Poughkeepsie and is dropped off at 5:20 at her family ranch, which is about 90 miles north of New York in a really small town called Stanfordville. She says to the bus driver, "The house is dark," which was really unusual, but she wishes the bus driver a happy Thanksgiving and gets off, not knowing what she was about to walk into. Bernice's dad, his name is James, he was a dairy farmer for Borden Dairy. You guys know it. It's like that really adorable smiling cow that has the daisy chain necklace.
Is that Elsie? Is that Elsie the cow?
It might be. She's like this real happy cow.
Iconic mascot.
Yeah. So that's who Bernice's dad, James, works for. Milk was their livelihood. They had all the dairy cows on their ranch. And when he didn't show up on Thanksgiving Day to make his delivery, people were kind of curious, but they didn't think too much of it because it was a holiday. Then the next day, he didn't arrive again, and people got super concerned. So a fellow employee named Willard Coons went out to their family ranch to see what was going on. He gets there at 9 a.m. the day after Thanksgiving and walks into the barn and see the dairy cows are in desperate need of milking. For reference, dairy cows need to be milked like 2 to 3 times a day. Don't get me started on milk consumption in this country, but they clearly had not been milked for 2 days. So he knows something is up. He walks over then to the tool shed and finds James, as well as the 10-year-old son Raymond, lying on the ground, soaked in blood, covered in stab wounds. He's terrified. Willard runs into the house and sees Mabel, Bernice's mom, the mom of the family, laying by the kitchen stove, frozen in blood. Because it's the 1930s and it's upstate New York in November. It was super cold that like the liquid around her froze.
I did not know that blood could freeze, but
I didn't either, but it's super gross. Bernice was laying huddled under the dining table. An investigator said in her position it looked like she had walked into what was happening to her family, crawled under the table for protection, but nevertheless was stabbed, and they described her stabbings like she had been hit like a pincushion.
Ooh.
Which is a gross visual. So Willard ran a mile away to where James's brother lived, got him for help, and then on the way back past Arthur Curry, who's their neighbor, and they all went running back to the house to see what's, going on. Arthur suggests they go in to make sure the killer's not still in the house, which is kind of a creepy choice for me, but of course the killer wasn't. So then things happen in the way that things typically happened in the 1930s. The police are notified, but it takes them a little bit to get there. So in the meantime, neighbors come to peek in the house and see what's going on and totally disturb the crime scene. Reporters noted that people were taking souvenirs from the house, and since it was Thanksgiving Day, people were eating their Thanksgiving food. How disrespectful.
Just a quick aside. Well, yeah, the food part is kind of disrespectful, but there's a lot of stories of these crime scenes, especially in this era, like the Villisca axe murder house. People also went in and disturbed the scene and took souvenirs. So apparently, not that I think people wouldn't do it today. I think people would still do it, but
they totally would. Just but now the police got it on lockdown.
Yeah, but sorry, continue.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because the police were actually part of the problem. While they were doing the sleuthing of this case, they were eating one of Mabel's pies. So there's that. They did, however, find a new butcher knife laying at the scene, but it had been completely wiped clean, no blood, no fingerprints or anything. And they didn't dust for fingerprints because so many people had been in the house. They figured, it would be such a disturbed crime scene.
Was fingerprint technology even.
Was it around back then? I don't know. The newspaper article said that, so I assumed it's true. But
Oh, I didn't think it had been. Well, 1930s. Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know. I know DNA definitely wasn't. That was
Well,
like
no.
the 80s. But.
Yeah.
So, according to the autopsy reports, Mabel was killed first, then Bernice, followed by James, and then Raymond. So, what they kind of puzzled together is maybe James was out working and Maybelle was in the house. Whoever killed them came and killed Maybelle. Bernice walked into the situation, and then Raymond ran outside to his dad to tell him what's going on. But that, of course, is all speculation. We don't know what happened. The author of the article that I read on Modern Farmer wrote my favorite line. It said, "Police were long on theories and short on facts." The family was a mild-mannered, working-class family, no enemies. They weren't incredibly wealthy, but they also weren't in a lot of debt. They were just living life like your regular farming family. Some people claim to see a strange man wandering near the farm that day. One shop owner even said a suspicious Spaniard bought a watch with a red-stained $10 bill. But police picked up this suspicious Spaniard, and none of the witnesses could pick him up out of a lineup. So, I mean, eyewitness testimony is also like super suspicious, but
And
that's
also
another episode.
pretty racist. Like,
Super
anytime
racist.
describe someone as like swarthy or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, it's always, it's definitely
racist.
racial profiling there.
Yes. Theories also went around about Bernice because she had been stabbed the most out of the family. Maybe it was like a guy she dumped who then came in to take revenge, but nothing really came of that either. What's interesting is that 2 weeks after the murder, James's wallet was found 2 miles away from the home, completely emptied, and he had cashed a check just like 2 days prior. So they suspect there could have been cash in there that was stolen. I mean, probably. But, who knows if all the cash was kept in that wallet. But guess who steps in to weigh in with his 2 cents? The governor of New York at the time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Never heard of him.
FDR lived like 20 miles from the crime scene. And he was super unhappy with how local police were handling the case. So he appointed the attorney general to take it over. To be fair, this is a super small town, and the police were completely in over their head. It's like a small farming town, but most people probably did would like steal each other's cows. There was never been a brutal family murder. But also on the other side of that coin, it was also kind of a corrupt town. Prohibition was going on, and the police in town were friendly with the locals that ran stills that made like Applejack, like the booze of the time. And they actually would take kickbacks from these people to keep from arresting them. So the new attorney general is now in place, and 2 years later, we finally have our first suspect. And it's a name you've heard before, Arthur Curry. He was the neighbor.
Arthur Curry is also the name of Aquaman. So if this story ends up being that Aquaman committed these savage murders, I'm going to be so disappointed and writing a sternly worded letter to Atlantis. Did you know Aquaman was Arthur Curry?
Is Aquaman Jason Momoa?
No. Jason Momoa portrayed Aquaman.
So handsome.
Yeah. Well.
Hubba hubba.
Hubba hubba. Yeah, I've hosted for Jason Momoa multiple times.
He seems like a super nice dude.
But he portrays Aquaman. But, I still prefer my Aquaman as, from Super Friends and whatnot. Either way, Arthur Curry is his
Aquaman.
His earth or his land name.
Yep, got it. Well, Arthur Curry, the neighbor, had served time for assault, was known for having a terrible temper. He was also a chicken farmer and a barber. And if you know Sondheim musicals, you know barbers are no good. But he also was a bootlegger, so he was friendly with the police. So maybe that's why it took someone new in place to get the first suspect. Turns out Arthur told his wife on the day of the murders that he was heading over to see James because James owed him money. He came home around 7, which Bernice got off the bus at like 5:20, so the timeline does kind of check out. But that was all they had in terms of evidence. So the police prosecuted him, and their court case argued that Arthur wanted to hunt on the Germans, or I don't know how to pronounce their last name, wanted to hunt on their ranch, but the family told him no. And also that the family owed Arthur around $400 in like today's money, and that he went over to this family and lost his temper when they didn't pay him back and killed them in the heat of the moment. But they lost the court case because there was serious room for doubt. There was like no real physical evidence tying him there. And the wallet that had been found was 2 miles in the opposite direction of Arthur's home. But that was like weeks later. And so, Arthur could have dropped it there at any time. Personally, I'm leaning to Arthur. If, he was a bootlegger, good with the cops, and they had like beef, But at this point, what's interesting is that FDR is now elected as president. So the heat is off of the attorney general to put like an end to this case. So they all just kind of stopped fighting for justice, and this case is still unsolved. And that's the death on a dairy farm murder.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, I think that you would think that as president, FDR could have still put some pressure just to solve that crime. But I think it was actually an FDR quote that self-interest is the enemy of all true affection. So he could have been, I guess he got caught up in the White House and couldn't put the pressure on. But other notes, Arthur Curry gives a bad name to Aquaman. Yes. And just a random aside, it was Elsie the cow, by the way, was the dairy cow. And she has a burial spot in Plainsboro, New Jersey. Her real name was Yule Dew Lobella. I guess Elsie was like her super name, Lobelia.
Sweet.
But that is an odd story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's I don't know automatically that bootlegging would make you violent, and the nature of the crime, man. I mean, it could be a heat of the moment, but the way you described the murders was not just in a fit of rage. It gets pretty personal when you...
Yeah, super personal. Stabbing is so personal.
Yeah, well, and then frozen in blood is pretty...
Ew, it's so gross.
But, wow. I did not know that one, so that's an interesting new ranch. Again, ranches be weird.
Ranches be weird.
All right, well...
Ranches be weird.
Ranch.
That's bad.
Yes, it was bad. But let's continue to the next story. But after a word from our sponsor. And we're back. Well, is Brooklyn one of the most haunted places in America? It's a worthwhile question. And this podcast happens to be brought to you in part by Brooklyn's one and only mobile ghost tour, Madame Morbid Trolley Tours, which is the official haunted tour of NightMerica. So, we've talked about this before. Madame Morbid, it's a Victorian-era funeral-inspired trolley, which just sounds like a great way to cruise around town, don't you think?
The only way I want to cruise around town.
The only way? See, you're making a bold claim. You're just planting a flag in only if it's not... If it's not Victorian-era funeral-inspired trolley... It's
why bother?
It's crap, according to Brit. Well, then that's why you should go on a Madame Morbid trolley tour first chance you get, because it is the only way to cruise around Brooklyn and learn about Brooklyn's haunted history and true crime. So they are currently off the road. They are social distancing. They're chasing ghosts, but they also have gift cards available for when they reopen, which hopefully is soon. As we're recording this, hopefully we're getting close to them being able to reopen. So be sure to check out MadameMorbid.com or give them a follow at MadameMorbidNYC to support your local ghost tour and our official haunted tour. And by the way, their answer is yes. Brooklyn is haunted. I think that, so you brought something new. I had not heard of that one before. And I was looking for something fresh as well. Again, didn't want to just retread some stories that are great but are kind of out there a lot. And I was looking up, this is actually a relatively new article from Outside Magazine, outsideonline.com, and it was written by A.C. Shilton. And this is the story of Flathead Lake Lodge. And this is a pretty new-ish story. And I'm leaning really heavily on the Outside Magazine on this because it was their story. I have not seen references to this beforehand. So I want to give that AC and Outside a lot of credit on this. Now, Flathead Lake Lodge, as it is supposedly the home to a Loch Ness monster type creature, or actually more like Flathead Lake itself is supposedly home to a Nessie type of creature. But interestingly enough, that's not the story. I mean, that's already weird in of itself. But this is this lodge. It was Doug Averill is the retired owner and manager of the Flathead Lake Lodge in Montana. And as he tells Outside Magazine, Doug grew up as one of 8 boys. His parents owned this massive dude ranch. And as a kid, these boys would run around wild. And he said, quote, "We rode around as a little gang of cowboys," which sounds pretty great, actually.
Super great.
Imagine 8 boys. They'd saddle up, they'd take off on the ranch, and then also check the cattle, check the land that the family owned and operated. And this is pretty remote rangeland. Now, in the 1960s, it was summertime. The brothers, I don't know how many brothers were on site, but the brothers came across, quote, "a ghastly sight." And on the ground were 3 dead cows, and they were arranged sort of in a circular fashion. Now, this is noteworthy because no obvious wounds were visible. Their reproductive organs had been removed. There was no blood, and Averill remembers it was almost surgical removal. Now, this is